Hello, everyone. I'm Jerry. That is Jake, and this is Tech for Creators. It's the show where we talk about hardware, software, platforms for things involved for the kind of the creator economy. Actually, I kind of hate saying all these buzzwords, but it's cameras, software, streaming, YouTube platform, things like that. And it's really a show where we kind of talk about the news of the week, geared towards like smaller independent creatives to follow trends and to um, keep keep up to date with things. Uh, so, Jake, how are you doing?
I'm doing great. I'm very happy to be here. I'm excited to talk about the things we got to talk about today, and give some spit some game to the small independent creatives.
Yep, absolutely. Thank you for doing this, by the way, too.
Yeah,
So,
love being
so
on here.
yeah, so basically we've got like three stories that we were going to run down. They kind of expanded out a little bit on things that just picked up on the news for the week, and we kind of just go through them as Jake and I are both really we support other people, but we also are trying to um, create our own kind of just our own channels and our own platforms too. So we kind of just give a viewpoint from people who are very small independent creators who aren't really part of a big production company or big ad agencies or things of that nature. So, and we both work in digital marketing and media. So, I feel like we have something to say about that stuff. The first, I guess let's just jump into the first story. And this was one that I just saw pop up. I don't know if you've been following this at all, but apparently Instagram is currently testing with some users a new way to kind of change the feed that people see. And I guess they're going to give them three different options. Something called the home, which is what the existing feed looks like. Favorites, which is a feed where obviously you've favorited people that you want to follow, and it will just show those favorites. And I guess that's similar to what Facebook allows too. So work off that kind of feature. And then there's something called following, which will just be the old chronological feed. And that's kind of the most interesting thing I see about this is that they're going to go back to theoretically a non-algorithm driven feed. So, which is something I think they've been getting pressure on a little bit. So what are your thoughts initially on this, Jake?
Yeah, I mean, in at least in my age group, there's been a lot of demand for something like a chronological feed because that's how Instagram was when they started out, and then they transitioned over to an algorithm type feed, and there was a lot of backlash for that. Um, I hold the unpopular opinion that I like the algorithm feed when it works. Um, I like to I like having my content kind of catered towards the things that I'm interested in. Um, but there are a lot of times when it doesn't work. So I think recently, with Reels rolling out, there's kind of been it seems to boost the Reels to the top of my feed just because they want to promote that service. So I'll get Reels all the time on my feed from people that I kind of forgot that I followed just because they want me to interact with the Reels. Um, I think it'll be really interesting if and when this gets rolled out to the public to see how many people actually switch over to the chronological feed, because I know there has been high demand for it, but um, I don't know if that'll really deliver. I kind of hold the unpopular opinion that, like, with how much Instagram has expanded, it's like not having an algorithm feed is kind of, I feel like it'll lower engagement from its users because, obviously you're shown content that it thinks you'll want to see. And if you're seeing everything and, if you're following, hundreds or thousands of people, there's just no way that it can cater to show you the content that you want to see. So I feel like if you get spammed by, people that you forgot you followed or people that you never really interact with, then, I think it'll drive people away from the app. And obviously I don't think that's what they want.
Yeah, I mean, I guess I'm a few things I would think about on this. First of all, I think that there's been a lot of pressure on Meta, I guess that's the name of the company, on Facebook and Instagram from political pressure, mostly related to Facebook and the elections and what they show in the algorithm. And there's been lots and lots of stories in the Wall Street Journal and all sorts of other places that, and I think people know that the algorithm tends to not radicalize people, but it tends to tend to really start to show you things that you start following down a path. So the algorithm feed, I think, has gotten kind of a bad reputation, that they're manipulating people, and they're manipulating people on something as kind of dangerous as a democracy. And so I think that spilled over into this Instagram a little bit. Like, I don't think Instagram has been accused of that as much as like Facebook and even YouTube. People complain about YouTube's algorithm. So I think that's the first reason. I think they kind of want to say, hey, look, we're going to give people the option to just go back to a chronological feed. We're not going to have anything to do with it. So I think they want to do that. I also agree with you that when it works, it's good. I do think that I'm not so sure. I think the little hidden gem in this might be the favorites feed. And the reason I say that is because I use Facebook, or I use Instagram, because it's a platform of communication to lots of different things. So it could be I follow Canon on there, for example, but I also follow you. So do I always want to see an ad for Canon and in the chronological feed? And there's also sometimes I follow someone because they're a writer or something, or maybe a photographer or something, and there might be interesting, but they get super obsessive and they start posting like 4 things in a row or something. And I don't want to see that in the chronological feed. It's like, look, I want to occasionally see who you are and check you out. And so maybe on the favorites, and I don't know if you can have different lists under the favorites. So like you could have a family favorite list, and then you could just see your family's stream. You could see your friends. So I don't know how granular they're going to make this, because I think that would be a kind of a nice thing to do, because Instagram kind of turns into this place where people generally communicate without having to text you. At least that's kind of the way I see it sometimes. Like, I'm not going to tell you that I'm in, Cabo, but I'll just post on Instagram, and if you follow me, you'll know that I'm there. And so when you see that person again, you can kind of say, hey, how was your trip? And so it's kind of like weird, but then people follow celebrities, and they follow, products. And you brought up a very good point too, is that, now I lost my train of thought. So it's on product, celebrity. Oh, you might follow like celebrities on there. I don't really do that. Oh, I know what I was going to say is they've also now have like 3 different products within Instagram, right? There's Reels, posts, and stories. So that just kind of complicates all of this. Like, what am I going to really see? I guess we'll just see how, when it rolls out, what it's going to be like. But I think generally this is a good thing to give people options, and whether you use it or not, to your point, like how many people really switch to the chronological feed, or how many people just use the default and forget it. And I think in some ways, I think Instagram wants people just to forget it so that they can say, hey, look, politicians, we're giving people a chronological feed, just nobody's using it, because they're just not going to make it the default. I don't know.
Yeah. No, I think that's a great point. I didn't even think about the whole political liability of it, because that is a great point. I forgot that they have been under fire for that, and giving people the option is going to, at least push off a little bit. Like, hey, we give people the option to set it chronologically, and it's up to them.
Yeah,
but
go ahead.
Oh, I was just gonna say I do agree with you that I think the hidden gem here is that favorites list, because there's a lot of like artists or brands or just any account that I want to follow and I'll see all the time on my explore page, but I don't want to follow them because I don't always want to see their stuff on my feed. So yeah, I think just giving people the option to choose how they interact with their platform, I think is a great move.
It's funny. This is not Instagram, but even just on YouTube, because I'm probably much more of a user of YouTube than I am of Instagram. Even kind of funny, but I will go to my biggest thing is that I go to the incognito mode a lot, so that I don't signal Google that I want this information. And because Google kind of captures it from everywhere and then they push it into YouTube. It's like if you want to check, well, Jennifer Lawrence's birthday, I just want to know what her birthday is or what her latest film is. I don't all of a sudden want a ton of news about her in my YouTube feed or anywhere else. And so Instagram and obviously Facebook don't have access to that Google, signal. So usually it's fine, that they don't know anything about that. But this is just kind of an interesting thing. It would be interesting to see how this plays out for creators. I think that Instagram is a really evolving platform. I think that it's going to be interesting. I think these things are just constantly changing, and I'm really surprised at like how much impact TikTok is having on everything, both YouTube and Instagram. And I feel like Instagram's going to see a lot of changes over the next few years because they're really pushing video now. It's not really a photo platform anymore. But anyway, so it's there. It's something to keep an eye out for. I will be interested to see it. I'll probably be one of the last ones to get it, probably, just because I'm not probably the target. I don't know. But so going on to the next story. Let me just see what this one is. Oh, so this is the next one I saw. This came from I think this is from Petapixels. So Andy Day and Petapixels, they wrote a blog post about a video from DP Review. So we've got a couple chains here. So I was alerted by this. I do follow DP Review. It's these are two Canadian guys, Chris and now I don't remember their names, but they have a very robust YouTube channel where they go through all sorts of they primarily do camera reviews, but every year at the end of the year they do their sum up, and I think they do a prediction for 2022, and so they went through that, and I thought this would be kind of a good segue in for you and I just to kind of riff on what we're thinking is going to happen. This is specifically towards cameras, but we could kind of expand it into just what we expect to see, camera, lenses, maybe even like other hardware for 2022. Did you get a chance to watch this video, Jake?
I didn't watch the video, no, but I kind of scrubbed through it and picked out some points.
Yeah, that's kind of what I did. I kind of went down to the time codes and looked at just the headlines of what they said underneath the video, because I did go to it's a YouTube video. It's DP Review TV is the YouTube channel if you want to watch it, and it was posted on January 5th, so just a few days ago. I mean, I can start. I mean, they list 1, 2, 3. They list about 9 things here. Some of the highlights they talk about is a 100 megapixel full frame camera. They do talk about Panasonic S1H replacement, which probably you might be able to speak to more. Raw video support, a Vlogger full frame camera, and then they do talk about budget lenses and what's going to happen with DSLRs. So they kind of cover a broad range of it. I don't know if we want to go through the list, or maybe I'll just leave it to you to see what did you pull out and you wanted to comment on.
I mean, in terms of specific, tech, I think the bigger thing that I focused on when looking at this was all the delays and the production, everything going into actually manufacturing and distributing all these products. But I do think in terms of creators, a lot of this stuff is. So I've had the same equipment since like 2016.
Right.
So it's very hard for me to like look at, be watching on the sidelines over all these years and see, oh my God, 100 megapixel full frame camera, all these, mirrorless cameras, the just everything really. And it's getting very hard for me to justify like keeping my camera after, 7 or whatever years.
Yeah, I think.
But
go ahead.
Oh, no, go ahead.
No, go ahead. I mean, I was just going to say, just generally to kick it off, is that I do feel like, first of all, this picking the story myself, I kind of it leads us down to a point of like, some of this is these guys are I think they owned a camera store. They work for a camera store. So a lot of it is the newest, the latest and greatest. And that does draw clicks and attention, and everybody wants to know the new thing. but I feel like sometimes I look at this and I'm looking more for trends. Like, okay, where is all this headed? I do not I don't have really any interest in a 100 megapixel camera right now, and I don't think it's necessary for the work I do or any of the clients I would work with or for myself. It's just interesting though. They're like, okay, if it's 100 megapixels, that means you're going to need better software, more processing power. You know, how are you going to deal with the output from a camera like that? It's awesome that you'd have better resolution. So some of these things I look at, and it's more, I get it. It's a prediction for the year, and these guys, that's what they do, and it's obviously it's also kind of entertainment for people like you and I to be like, oh, what's coming out? But I don't know that I would point to. I think the bigger story is exactly what you said, which is the supply constraint for equipment into 2020. I think that's the headline, and maybe it won't be, but if I had to make a prediction, that's more of it. Just basic, like, how do I get a lens? How do I get a camera if I want to buy it? Is it going to be a 2-month lead time? I think Canon said that the R3, their brand new professional grade camera, is 6 months or something like that, 6 or 8 months lead. I mean, that's unbelievable. Since digital cameras been produced, I've never heard of a delay that long for a camera that's been announced. I mean,
Yeah.
so and everybody, and even Sigma, the president of Sigma at CES said, the lens company said, yeah, we're going to have delays. So, yeah, I think that's the big headline thing. And sorry, I cut you off now, but yeah.
No, I mean, that's a great point. And I think that also ties into, again, I hate using this word too, but the whole creator economy thing, because I think, especially on YouTube, like there's been such a high demand and a high drive for authenticity, right, on the platform. And it's interesting to me to see some of the biggest YouTubers like Mr. Beast, Mark Rober, there's a whole gaming side of it. Like they're all insanely, popular. They have tons of money, a high budget for every video they make and all that. But especially someone like Mr. Beast specifically chooses to not use expensive equipment. I think he did a video with MKBHD where he kind of talked about that Squid Game video he did. I'm not sure if you were following any of that, but he pointed out like he's got a whole room of like cheap DSLRs, and cheap kit lenses and stuff like that, because he intentionally wants to send the message that A, this is authentic, B, it's accessible. Anyone can do this. So I think that that whole message of like authenticity and easy accessibility in the creator economy, mixed with these huge supply issues that we're having with more higher end stuff, is really going to push creators to just say, you know what, screw it, I'll just use my phone, or I'll just use a T3i or whatever. Like, I think that's super interesting.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a couple of things to that. I mean, I think, first of all, I was going to say, like, I think it refocuses people back onto what do they have already. And, if I'm going to be 8 months without this latest and greatest thing, it takes the pressure, it's like a freedom. It's like, look, I can't get the R3 even if I wanted it. So there's no more excuse like, oh, I'm going to wait for my R3 and start doing stuff. It's like, no, just you're going to have 8 months without it, and you might as well start using what you have if you're going to produce something, or you have a client that you need to produce something for. So, and you can blame it on, you tell the client, look, we're going to use this camera because it works and it's there, and maybe it's not the latest and greatest, but good luck trying to find the latest and greatest right now. It's just going to be it's going to be either much more expensive, or it's just delayed. You just can't get it at all. So, and I think not having, at least for myself, not having to even have to think about like, okay, there's this new 100 megapixel camera that's out right now. It actually makes me feel better about like, it's, what I have is what I have. I also kind of do wonder, like, because I did upgrade myself. But I sold a bunch of equipment. Like I sold my 5D4 and a 80D I think I had, and a EOS R. So I got the R5. I sold like 3 cameras to get one camera, but there's a company called KEH is who I used, and I am kind of curious as to how the used camera market's going to react to this, because just like used cars right now are like skyrocketing, I guess, because the same chip problem is impacting new cars. What does that mean for used equipment? Like, so maybe if you do have some piece of equipment that you for sure don't think you're going to use, and you've thought, oh, well, I missed the boat on being able to sell it. Maybe it's a time to say, okay, I've got 2 cameras or 3 cameras. I've got this kind of really old one. Maybe it's not a bad time to sell it because, there's just not, the price might be a little more supported now because people just need a camera, like you said, just to produce anything. So it's going to be interesting there. I also think, it takes away that gear acquisition syndrome, whatever gas people talk about. Is like there's really nothing to do that for because they're not available.
Yeah, no, I think that like, ultimately in any field, any creative field, having the limitations of like not feeling like 100 megapixel full frame camera is super inaccessible, or feeling like a cinema camera is just not something that you can get right now. Just feeling those limitations of like, I can't, there's no way I can get any of this equipment. I think that's always going to be good for creators that are starting out and getting into the whole creative field, because like you said, it kind of focuses more on the storytelling aspects and the messaging and the imagery, and getting good at the art of it, and then worrying about all the outside details later.
Totally. I'm trying to grab a screenshot of one other thing that was kind of ancillary, and I'll probably bring it up just live here because I don't, how good I am with the preview mode. So if people are watching, if you're catching this on the restream of it, I am using Ecamm to produce this, and so I am going to do something tricky here and pull this off and just drag on a graphic so that we can talk about this. So this is a little clunky if you're watching. But there was this one other thing. I don't know if you even had a chance to. I kind of threw all this at Jake at the last minute, so I'm not sure he got a chance to review a lot of this. But
I got a lot to say about this stuff.
Did you read this? Did you look at this?
I read it. Yep.
Yeah, I thought it was super interesting. And I actually think there's a few things that you mind if I go first on it?
Yeah, go for it.
So let me just run through his 5 predictions. I think they're 5. Number 1, the next generation of top talent will be polygamous careers. I mean, I guess they're just people that have multiple skill sets. They're going to want to do different, they're going to have careers that cover multiple skill sets, is the way I read that. Mm-hmm. The second one was he's talking about immersive experiences will be mainstream 3D creations, the metaverse, which is like, okay. Then he's talking about the stakeholder. Number 3 is the stakeholder economy, where you turn customers and employees into business owners, or, I think that's another way to build kind of passionate followers, both employees and customers. Number 4 is artificial intelligence will make personalization too good to opt out. And number 5 is the next generation will be a nomadic decade where life and work, where people can work wherever they want and kind of move around, is kind of the gist of what he had. I'm going to skip the metaverse thing, his prediction on the metaverse, because I honestly think any prediction on, you and I talked about this before, any prediction on that is just guesses, and I think it's more people trying to literally try to speak themselves into something happening. I really don't know I don't think anybody has any idea. I think there will be something with this 3D experience and the immersive stuff that you and I talked about before, but and I don't think it's a trend that necessarily is going to be that big in 2022, with the exception of maybe if there is a product, and I'm thinking specifically of Apple. If they came out with this, there's rumored to have some goggles that they're going to bring. I think Apple is about the only company that I would look at, just because I'm an Apple fanboy, I guess, that could actually bring a consumer product that would get widespread adoption, and then that could be something. But I honestly I don't think they're going to. So anyway,
That's kind of the only thing I had on that. It felt like a big Adobe ad to say, "Oh yeah, 3D
yeah,
is going to be the future, and we have this software that can allow you to unlock that whole world." But I think the bigger thing is like I don't think the world is really ready for VR. Kind of like you said, there's not really an accessible like entry into it, and in my head, and the people I know, VR is kind of still like a nerdy, like people who are into like gaming and stuff. That's who it's marketed for in my kind of space. I don't really see it as like a common person kind of thing yet, and I obviously don't think it's gonna cross that line in the next year.
yeah. I mean, I think I honestly I think the gaming. I think it's been very successful in gaming, right? I mean, doesn't I mean
Totally.
Microsoft has their HoloLens? Is that it?
Hmm.
That product theoretically, from what I understand, is very popular. There are people who are very, love it, and they're the kind of ones that you need those early adopters to preach it and say you got to experience this. This is awesome, and that's what I think does drive it. But I still feel like I think when we initially talked about this, this feels like Bill Gates predicting the mobile internet in 1998. He was like, everyone's going to have these devices and they're going to walk around and they're going to be able to access the internet. And generally speaking, he's right. But his dive down into that was it was going to be a laptop that you could convert into a tablet, and you were going to use Microsoft Office on it. And he was trying to push his products
Yeah.
onto something, a trend he felt like long term was coming, and they went down that path, and they developed not very good products for it. And but he was generally right about the mobile internet. I think he did
Hmm.
was, as probably a lot of people were back in the late 90s, that there was going to be the internet everywhere. And it's like, okay, yeah, 20 years later we have our phones that have the internet available, and it's fundamentally changed the economy in terms of Uber and those types of mobile apps that can really create new things. I do think that this is really a ad for Adobe in some ways. I mean, everything he talked about was, but they are in the creator space, and so he's pushing into it. I do feel, even though it is an ad, that he does have some good points, and that is, I do
Hmm.
think that people really should, whether you're going to be in a corporation, we're speaking to small creators here, or people who are trying to do video or trying to do podcast productions, or they're trying to help people do that. I do feel that the ability to continue to learn, like learn new software and learn new platforms, is super valuable. And I think that is where the economy is going, is that the expectation of someone who's going to hire you either as a freelancer or as a corporation, I think it's very helpful to be able to do many things. And even though that's a little bit stressful sometimes because you can't become an expert in one thing, I just think that's where we are now. You can't necessarily uh, afford to just have one person who's just dedicated, unless it's like a huge corporation. But um, I think it's always going to be like, so I guess what I'm trying to say is that for myself, and I'm always trying to learn, all sorts of things like InDesign and web design and then video and audio, and just try to keep up to date with uh, things that interest me, but also I think that could be valuable, going forward.
Yeah. I think that I 100% agree, and I think that it's super important as a creative to not pigeonhole yourself into one thing. I will say, um, I do feel like, as an employer, it's going to be a lot easier to, I don't want to say exploit, but it's going to be a lot easier to kind of just exploit
Yeah.
creatives,
Yep.
if because if the standard is for creatives to, be at least somewhat of an expert in multiple fields, if you're not that, then A, you're probably not going to get hired. But if you are that, then it's going to be easier to justify like, paying you less
Yeah.
or expecting you to do more. So I feel like that exploitation is kind of inevitable, but I do hope after that kind of happens, I hope that creatives that have found a way to into different spaces and learn multiple skills, start to understand how valuable they really are. Like that's what I really hope. It really is like the demand for that kind of person is through the roof.
No, I guess that's, yeah. You said it better than me. Is that it's hard. It's a harsh word, but I do feel it's a little exploitive, and it's also, it feeds into a little bit of this hustle culture that
Mm,
a lot of people, like hustle culture being almost toxic, meaning that there's this pressure to like have your job and then have a side hustle. And so it's like everything you do in your life has to be creating money, and it has to be, you know, and what does that say about our society, that people are, you know, not so stressed, but they're being pushed so hard. And so
yeah.
I almost feel like that it's like the hustle culture within a company. It's like, oh, I'm going to do all these things, and you're right. What will happen is employers are like, great, I love that you're learning all this stuff on your free time. We used to train people and pay them to learn, but now you should be learning that at night. And it's like, oh, okay, well, but fortunately, those are things you can take, you instill within yourself and you take with you. But you're absolutely right. Employers are not going to complain if you're learning new skills and they didn't have to pay for it. So, but I do feel like it is inevitable, and we live in a, really kind of a hyper capitalistic society where competition is the game. And so
Yeah.
if there's one person here and one person there, you are competing, and it's just the way it is. So that was kind of a bummer to go there, but but that is kind of the prediction. So learn some stuff, I guess, is what we're trying to say.
And know
Uh,
your value.
yeah, and I guess that leads into this final story, which isn't really like tech for creators. It wasn't, but it's one that I do feel sometimes where this channel, I'd like to take this channel as both, obviously technology. I love it. I love hardware, software. I'm fascinated by how all this is impacting our economy and how we can use these tools to really get a message out. And this was just a story I saw. It's on a blog post called 1854 Photography, I think it is. But it was really more of a way to lead into a story about about personal projects. And this story is about a woman, Daniela Bowman, I think it is, where she learned about what was called the Great Migration, which was this migration of African Americans from 1915 to 1970, leaving the Deep South for northern cities and the West. And her father left, I think it was Texas, and moved to California. And so that's what kind of pulled her interest into it, is like, she's like, oh, my father, I guess, would be considered part of this cultural phenomenon. And so she went in and just started doing pictures of it. And it's an interesting story, but what it made me think of is that there are, it's very important, I think, that people don't always, the latest and greatest Instagram or the latest and greatest this and that, is that you go out and find things that interest you, that you want to highlight, that are of interest to you. And it's, and so I don't know, I just thought that this was an interesting thing as a reminder for people to, and it reminds me that, you know, don't, you know, don't necessarily put off those personal projects. They're very important for yourself as a person, but also, and this is the part that's a little bit weird, but they're also important for you developing your, really your client base. It's, people will see you for the skill sets you have, and they may hire you just because of a project that you do that's, personally important to you. I don't know if you have things to say about this, Jake.
Yeah. Something that I try to take into basically all my creative work is like this notion of living. And there was a, what's his name? Austin Kleon article that you also linked along with this, talking about perspectives and like, uh, what did he say? Or not perspectives. Go ahead.
But no, I think it was noticing. I mean, I think what he was
Noticing.
saying,
Yeah.
yeah, it was about a writer, and so you would think, well, why does a writer have anything to do with video, right? But the way he was teaching how to write was the same process by which I think photographers and videographers could look at their own self, is to like, whatever, if you walk down the street or if you go somewhere, you travel, whatever you notice, you should kind of make like a mental note of it. He doesn't, you should absorb it and understand it, but it's your unique framework on the world. And so when you notice something, that's that's the beginning of where you could start your platform to, or that's this place where you can start a story that you could tell other people, I guess, right?
Yeah. Yeah. So it's in my opinion, it's super important to understand that like art is a reflection of, and you can argue about whether all this is art, but art is a reflection of your life, right? And it's about how you view the world and how you perceive basically everything. It doesn't exist in a vacuum, so we need the outside world to kind of, fuel the stuff that goes on inside. So with all of my personal projects and all my, client work and all that, like I'm drawing inspiration from the things that I see and the things that go on in my life, because that's what sets me apart from other creatives and other, on the more technical aspects of things, like how I cut certain things or how I, set up a camera. It's all based on my experience just in the world, Go ahead.
No, exactly. I mean, I'm just shaking my head because I agree with you in terms of
Oh,
like, yeah. I mean, but the weird thing is that you may do something as a personal project, and you think, and the best way to approach it is to say, there's no like alternative motive for me to do this other than it's important to me to do this, and but what I think will happen is, especially if it's something sort of niche, or niche, like it's it's very specific, that tends to like counterintuitively will attract more people, and people will look at you as, this is what this person offers, not just the technical skills of what being able to do it, but the way they view the world, and they pay for both your ability to manage a camera and to do editing and all that, which is really more pure technical. But then they expand it out to like, it's the way this person's voice is, and that's where you can exponentially make, like, that's when that's what artists, that's when they really start to get paid a lot of money, because it's unique. It's like, you don't get it. You can't just get that from another person. I'm hiring this person because of their voice, and I'm hiring this person for who they are. And that is like the gold standard of like how to present yourself. And I hate to keep making it so about money, but I suppose I am. I don't know.
well, no, even just, I mean, apart from, gathering a client base, like it's about happiness, right? It's about
Yeah.
finding joy in the things you do. Creativity is such a you driven thing. Like it's your life. Nobody can replicate what you do. Nobody has seen the world in the same way that you have. Like you should always want to create things that you want to create, and that you feel qualified to create. Like on my YouTube channel, I talk a lot about letting yourself burn out. And I think it's super important because like if you feel like you have to create something because, you're working for a client or something, or you just, you feel like you're good at this one thing, but you don't feel like you have the life, like you don't, kind of like this, you don't feel like you've seen enough of life and seen just, viewed enough to fuel that art, you shouldn't do it because like it's so counterintuitive to push yourself to create something when you don't want to, because it's never going to turn out as good as something like a passion project where you do feel genuinely and authentically interested in it.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I think it's also, like you said, the burnout of it, but also the idea that if you have an interest in it, I mean, part of the reason, like you're right, part of why I even like this channel exists is because I found myself every week, I listening to tech podcasts, other people's podcasts, and enjoying those. But when I was listening to them, I'd always have, but I want to say something about it, and and the fact that I would also like, I pick up my iPad, I have Feedly app, and I go through all of the news and announcements each week. It's because I'm interested in it. I enjoy it. It's like I want to stay up on trends, and I'm fascinated by it, and so to some extent, it's not work. It's like, oh, I want to talk about these kind of things. Like, so the ability to talk to you about this and go over this is, I don't feel like it's work. It's just interesting things to me. And so
Yeah.
it doesn't feel, it's still an effort, like before we started, we were talking, it's like, to put all this together and organize it, you can get very nervous, and there is work related to it. But once you get into the flow of it, I love it. It's very interesting, and I'm fascinated by it. I'm fascinated by the world. So, and I think that's the types of projects and the types of things you should do for yourself, because you'll tend to be more enthusiastic about it, and you'll tend to take the time to understand something at a really deep level, and that therefore you'll be able to communicate that better, and really people will see that in the work, I guess.
Yeah.
So
No, I mean, it kind of goes along what I was saying earlier. Like, there's such a high demand for authenticity in, again, I hate using the term, but the creator economy, with creativity in general, there's such a high demand for authenticity. And to your point, like, when you're really genuinely interested in what you do and the things that you're saying, it doesn't feel like work. It doesn't feel like something that you have to do. And I think that even though it is insanely difficult to push yourself to keep going when when you're doing something out of passion, like, the payoff is so high because you're going to attract people that are also interested in the things that you're interested in. There's just the demand for that kind of thing is just insane.
no, I agree, and even, I mean, I know I don't like the word authentic either, or creator economy. I mean, I guess I use them because it's kind of easy shorthand, but or the word I'm about to use, which is influencer. I don't like those words at all, but they do serve a purpose. It's like I know that because of myself. When I follow someone, it's not so much like, oh, this person's authentic, but like, even when we talk about, what is it, Ali Abdul? I mean, is that he's brilliant. I mean, he's a brilliant guy, and you follow him. And I'm sure not every YouTube video he puts out is he super happy about, like, when he's talking to the camera, he seems in a very good mood and everything. And I'm sure it's hard work for him, for sure. But it feels like his videos generally come from a place of who he is. So if you were to go have coffee with him or lunch, you would probably be able to talk to him about the things he talks about in his YouTube videos, and he would be just as like excited about them, and he could talk about them for an hour, right? And that's what comes through in the videos. You're like, oh, this guy really likes this, and he's drawing my interest into it. And it does have this effect of, well, if he is enjoying it, then I think I should get that book, because I know him. It's like a friend recommendation. It's like good
Yeah.
family, or your friends you trust, or they know something, and you're like, okay, that's the person to follow on this. And so that's kind of like a standard that I think is very hard to achieve, and it's kind of I think people are on guard and suspicious now, because people game the system and try to make things look authentic when maybe they're not, and there's a commercial interest behind it. I think it happens all the time with, historically, athletes and celebrities have always endorsed things, and you always think, even at that level, like, you normally think, like, you're very suspicious if you're watching a football game and some celebrity comes on and endorses a vodka or whatever. It's like, they got paid for it. That doesn't feel authentic. I'm sure they might drink it because they're getting it for free, but this isn't maybe the thing they would reach for, or whatever it is. So when you get into like YouTube and these other platforms where people are making more of a direct audience appeal, and they're building community, which is another word that's good, but I'm kind of getting a little bit weird about it. But when they're building a community, they really are. I mean, they really are. You start to trust them, and so it's very important that they continue to hold that trust and not quote unquote sell out and and take money and then recommend something that they really wouldn't have recommended. So anyway, I guess that's all long-winded, but it's interesting. But I guess tying it back is that it starts with following things you're interested in and being true to what you believe in, and other people will find you, and that's a good way to start to build a relationship. Online or with anybody is to just share what you're interested in, and you'll find other people that are interested in it also.
The authentic creator is always going to come out on top in the way things are now.
It's hard work.
It is.
But, I mean,
it's very hard work.
Well, it's hard work because it's not hard to be authentic. It's hard work to be consistent and to be coherent, at least for me. Now, there are some people who are very just coherent off the top of their head, but it's hard work for me to communicate what I want to say sometimes in a way that's compact enough and efficient enough for people to want to watch rather than some rambling.
Just interesting enough.
Yeah. And a value.
That's my the biggest thing I have an issue with, but it's also one of my favorite parts of like making YouTube videos is kind of like you said, I could talk to a camera for 30 minutes and just kind of stream of consciousness everything about it, but the interesting part of it is figuring out how to make it interesting, how to make it entertaining, and how to make it, something tangible, something valuable.
Yeah. For the viewer. So they're not just like
for the viewer.
So it's not some sort of ego thing for you to just tout off on, but you're actually, and that's what I think Ali does really well, is that he discovers something and then he's able to consolidate, or what's the word I want to extract out the in a very efficient way why he finds it valuable and can communicate that to you, and you're like, wow, this is fantastic. He pulled out the 5 things out of this book that really are interesting, and like something maybe you haven't even thought about before, and that's, to me, is like a real skill. He's a super talented person and smart, so of course, but it's it's just something, I think, like anything else you always tell me, is just one video a week, just keep practicing it, and over time, those skills will just develop naturally, I think.
It's a puzzle. It's a ever-evolving puzzle.
Absolutely. Well, we managed to spend 49 minutes talking about all this. Where can people find you, Jake?
I got
there
you go. It's right there, jakeharmio.com. You can check out my website, or if you just do /YT, I set up a neat little forwarding link that you can just check out my YouTube channel. I post a lot of stuff there about kind of along this kind of line, just stuff for creatives and artists to just keep going and going easy on yourself and navigating this wild economy that we're in. I think it's a really interesting time for creative people.
Yeah, and I think the big thing for you is that you're you and I are pretty different in age. Like, I'm older than you're much younger, but you're of an age, and you're also, but you have real experience. Like, you are out there, you have worked, creating stuff. You've been using these platforms and understanding them and getting feedback and experience to know what works, what doesn't work, and also doing it on your own, having to go out and do it on your own. So, you have a core set of skills that are, really solid, but you also, I think, have a lot more experience than is typical for someone at your age, that, of being out there into the commercial world and having to really do it. So, I really appreciate you coming on and giving us your insight, because you can kind of balance all of that and see it all in terms of from what you're hearing within the real world. I mean, I don't hang around a lot of people where they, most of the people I hang around with don't use these platforms and such. So I appreciate you coming on.
Thank you. I appreciate you having me on. It's been really interesting to be on three sides of the same coin where, being a consumer of I need to stop using the
Yeah.
term, but the creator
Yeah.
economy,
Yeah.
being a consumer of it, contributing to the success of a more, corporate, commercial type thing, and then also wanting to do it on my own. It's three sides of the same coin, and it's super. I think it's incredibly interesting to take all of those and apply it, and just kind of watch and participate in seeing where it goes. I think it's just an amazing space to be in.
Yeah. And I think the tension too, just really quick here, is that understanding the trends and absorbing those is something I think you have a really good skill set for. But having clients that sometimes you can't communicate that to, or they have their own ideas, can be very frustrating. But that's why I think that third side of the coin, or whatever we called it, is important, because if someone, you'll provide them with other services that they need, but then if you're frustrated that you feel that there's another way to do something, you can do that on your own. And I think that's a good model for anybody watching who's trying to do both, trying to do something for themselves, but also understand that they need freelance work on the side, or if they even work for a corporation or an agency or whatever it might be, they don't get frustrated with take what you can learn from your existing clients, help them obviously as best they can if they want to listen to you. But most people, most clients are going to be independent, and sometimes they're not going to take everything you tell them. So just you save that for yourself and just lean into it and learn that way. Or at least that's kind of what I try to do too. So
Yeah, learn what works, and more importantly, learn what doesn't work,
exactly.
so you can avoid it.
All right, man. Well, thanks. We're gonna bow out here, and we'll see you. I'm starting out 2022 doing this. So
Jerry, we'll see you next week.
all right, I
Right?
will see you next week. All right,
There you
I'm
go.
out. Bye.